Hello, I just got a new lens. Here it is. It is a Canon 300mm f4 L lens with IS and USM. What does that mean, you ask? Well, 300 means that the focal length is 300mm. What on earth does that mean? Is it 300mm from the sensor to the front element? I don't actually know. No, that's definitely not true, because that's currently, that can be at 17 and it's more than 1.7. Yeah, so 300mm, I don't actually know where that number comes from, but I do know that it means it's 6 times magnification, because your eyes see at about 50, it's more like 51 or so millimeters, and so if this sees at 300, that means it's at 6 times magnification. But if you have a crop sensor like I do, you get an extra 1.6 times magnification, at which point this becomes a 480mm lens, if I haven't buggered the maths. Yes, f4, what does that mean? It means that its maximum aperture is f4. Where does that number come from? I've absolutely no idea. It's some sort of ratio between the... I'm actually cheating by how long this... It's actually that long, but it looks better like that. And it's got a red ring, so you know it's an L lens. I'll get onto that. f4, that's the aperture. That's the main reason I bought this lens, actually, is because it's f4. What's IS mean? Image stabilizer. Get onto that. USM, what does that mean? Not entirely sure. I think that means ultrasonic motor. I haven't researched this video. I will tell you all the thought process I went through to buy this lens, and no more, because I don't know anything more than I know. Great British cup of tea. Anyway, so why did I buy this lens? Didn't you already have a long lens, you ask? And yes, I did. I had this one. A Tamron 70 to 300 f4 to 5.6 lens. And this one also has image stabilization and what they call an ultrasonic silent drive, which is the same thing. Basically, it means that the autofocus is quiet, unlike on my everyday lens, the 17 to 50, which is not quiet, which is why all of my videos are filmed using manual focus. I should really invest in a new lens but not a new standard. Anyway, yes, so this was my old long lens. I've had this for 3 years now, and it's done me pretty well. It's taken this picture, and this picture, and this picture. Now, if I haven't learned how to use an snap cut, is it, or shot cut? If I haven't learned to use that by the time this video goes out, then I'll just look like a dick, because there won't have been any pictures up. Anyway, yeah, so this is a really good lens. I recommend it to anyone. But, so why did I pay, I'll tell you how much, £650 for this one, when this one, I've just said, is very good. Well, I said that the aperture on this was f4 to f5.6. Now, when it's at 70mm, like this, it's f4. When it's at 300, it's like this, it's f5.6. Now, what's wrong with f5.6? Nothing is wrong with f5.6, but it's not as good as f4. Now, what your aperture is the size of the hole that the light goes through when it gets, before reaching your sensor. And f5.6 is a smaller hole than f4. What does that mean? Less light. How much light? Half the amount of light. I get half as much light at 300mm with this as I do at 300mm with this. Why is that a problem? Well, because photography is all about compromise. You have your ISO, the sensitivity of your sensor, your aperture, which is the size of the hole, and your shutter speed, which is how long the shutter stays open for. And you have to balance these 3 things and decide what you're going to prioritise. And so I found myself looking back on my pictures and thinking I wish I had more light, because above ISO 800 on the 760D it gets too grainy for me, and I find myself shooting in lower light, or no, that's it, in lower light, and I'm being limited by that, and even at ISO 400 it's noticeable. So I ask myself, what can I do? I can either upgrade the body to the Canon 90D, which has just come out and has a much younger sensor in it, and it's got better noise performance, as well as being a tier. So it'll be five years younger than my camera, and a tier above my camera, so an upgrade. But that would have to be £1,000. Or what I could do is I could change my lens, get double the amount of light, and spend £650. And it just so happened that I had £650 exactly saved up from my job, so I spent it on that. Yes, so that's what I decided to do. And also, you may not know this, but lenses depreciate like gold. They don't. They do a little bit, but they really don't. And then camera bodies depreciate like BMWs immediately. So it's a better investment to invest in a lens. Always invest in glass. Also, that's another point, the glass in this is better than the glass in this. What does that mean in real terms? Chromatic aberration. What's chromatic aberration? It's when, say for instance, you're taking a picture of an aeroplane against the sky, and at the edges it's gone a bit purple or something. Just very slight. If you zoom in on a good one, you'll just see a tiny bit of purple, and on a bad one you'll see the purple, the chromatic aberration. And better glass will cut down on this, and I have got some better glass. Yeah, you might be thinking, how on earth did I get this for £650? Because aren't they £1,200 new? Yes, they are. This is a good condition used one from MPB, which is a really good website. So it's got a couple of cosmetic scratches, but the internals are still practically mint, and so there's really... You wouldn't tell the difference between a photograph taken by this and a photograph and the same photograph through a brand new lens, basically. So that's why I got this one. Downsides. The downside of this lens is that it's not as flexible. It's a prime lens, which means it's fixed. Every picture I take through this is going to be at 300mm, whereas with this one I have that flexibility from 70 to 300mm, which I really used. Maybe starting to hear the rain outside. In, for instance, this picture, and this picture, and that picture, taken with this lens, but at about 160 or so, or 190 or 90, or even 210, but not 300. And I won't be able to do that with this anymore. And I went through some of my pictures, namely my pictures from React 2019, and my pictures from when I've gone to Dunmail Rays, which is when I use that the most. A quarter of them I wasn't at 300mm, which was it's not a small proportion. Wildlife, I always want more. I always want as much magnification as possible, so that's not a problem. But a quarter of my aeroplane pictures suddenly becoming unfeasible was a problem for me, which was pushing me slightly further towards the 90D. But I decided in the end to get that one. Now you may be thinking, is that the best lens for me? You can't see it, it's out of frame. I can see that it's out of frame. I'll hold it. Yes, there was another lens, the Sigma 300mm f2.8. Now you might be thinking, ooh, f2.8. Is that another aperture size? Yes, it is. It lets in twice as much light as f4. So why didn't I go for that one? It was about the same price. By the way, if you're not used to photography kit, longer lenses and wider apertures cost more money as a general rule, as well as the quality of the internals, but you can't really measure them with numbers. So in terms of numbers, the aperture and the magnification is what will dictate the price for telephoto lenses. Anyway, yeah, so the Sigma 300 f2.8, why didn't I get that? It didn't have image stabilization, and you cannot undervalue image stabilization. It started raining and my camera started flashing red. Yeah, so I'd have got twice as much light in through the Sigma, but it would be going through worse glass, and also I'd have traded every single stop of light for shutter speed to counter its lack of image stabilization, at which point, what is the point? It's also beefier than this one, so I'd get none of the benefits, some of the disadvantages, for slightly more money and more space. So this one's better. And also, another good thing about this lens is you can pair it with one of Canon's f1.4 teleconverters. Now, if you don't know what a teleconverter is like a girlfriend. I've not got one. No, what it does is, say a 1.4 times teleconverter gives you 40% more magnification, so all of a sudden this isn't a 300mm f4, it's a 420mm f5.6, because teleconverters also reduce your aperture. So with a teleconverter on, and my dad's got one, so I borrowed his when I took this picture. I borrowed his, and so I've now got the same aperture at 300mm with this, but I've got an extra 120mm of zoom, which is very, very useful. And so with my crop sensor and an f1.4 teleconverter, I no longer have 300mm of magnification, I have 672 at f5.6, which is very good, which is more magnification than one of Canon's 600mm lenses on a full frame camera. And if you jotted up the price of this lens, a teleconverter and my camera, you'd get to a little under 1,500 quid if you added up the cost of a 5D Mark IV, and it really is raining very hard now. 5D Mark IV and one of Canon's 600mm lenses, you'd be well over £10,000. So this, for the money, is a really, really good setup. So that's why I got this lens. No one's watching now because well, if you're into photography, you already knew all of that, and if you're not, you didn't understand the numbers and you got bored. Bloody hell, it's raining. I'm just going to talk for a bit more. Yeah, so I really like this lens. It's got this collar here for mounting it on a tripod because the lens is so heavy. If you mounted the camera to the tripod, then put this on it, you'd run a risk of damaging the connection, and your camera would be really front heavy and it would put the tripod off balance. So it's got this little collar, which I find is also useful for holding it. Click, click, click. The autofocus is fantastic in this lens. I know the camera body does most of the job with autofocusing, but the lens is the one that actually has to be in focus. So this is really good, and it's got 2 image stabilizer modes. So if I turn this, you can turn stabilizer on or off. I of course want it on. Why would you ever turn it off? And it's got mode 1 and mode 2. Mode 1 is for when you're taking pictures stationary, and mode 2 is for when you're panning. Yeah, so that's how you use modes 1 and 2. Yeah, nothing can be gained from continuing this video. Do you like my lockdown haircut? It's I did it myself. It's not great. It was even worse when I first did it about 7 weeks ago. It was very, very short. I used a number 4 just all over. It's the first time I've had my hair shaved, and I didn't know how long a number 4 was until I went zzz, looked in the mirror and realised I'd made a terrible mistake. But at that point it was too late, and I wasn't going to see anyone for 6 weeks anyway, so it didn't matter. Yeah. So, bye.